Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, everyone. I am Ana Cristina Osterman, and it's my greatest pleasure to introduce the speaker we have for today. But before anything else, we'd like to introduce Aberlin ao Vivo. Aberlin ao Vivo Linguists Online is an initiative of the Brazilian Linguistics Association and is designed to give students and researchers free access to state-of-the-art discussions on the most diverse topics related to the study of human language. Our speaker today, Angelique Alvanodi, is a social linguist specializing in language and gender, language and interaction, and language contact. She's currently lecturing at the Aristotle University of Thessaloniki, Greece, and she's a research associate at the Institute of Modern Greek Studies. She also works as a postgraduate tutor at Hellenic Open University, and she's an adjunct lecturer in linguistics at James Cook University, Australia. In April 2013, Angelique graduated with a PhD from the Aristotle University of Thessaloniki. And in her doctoral dissertation, she explored the cultural and cognitive aspects of grammatical gender in Greek in talk and interaction. In May 2013, she took up a 2-year postdoctoral fellowship at the Language and Culture Research Center, James Cook University, to examine the Greek variety of spoken by immigrant communities in far north Queensland, Australia. Angelique has written the books Grammatical Gender in Interaction, Cultural and Cognitive Aspects, published with Brill in 2015, and Modern Greek in Diaspora, an Australian Perspective, published with Palgrave Pivot in 2018. Angelique has published several articles in various journals, including Gender and Language, the Journal of Greek Linguistics, and Text and Talk. Her most recent work focuses on Creole discourse and the status of discourse markers in language context situations, and will appear in the Journal of Pidgin and Creole Languages later this year. And on a more personal note, I'm happy to say that Angelique has been to Brazil before at the IGALA conference held at Unicinos in 2012. So it's great to have you back, Angelique, even though not really here, right? The title of her talk today is Gender, Social, Cultural, and Cognitive Perspective. Welcome, Angelique.
Hi, Christina. Thank you so much for the introduction. I'm really happy and honored to be part of the Aberlin ao Vivo online lectures. I will share my screen now so that we can start. Okay. I believe that you can see me, both me and my screen.
Yes, we can. And I just would like to tell everyone that you can write in the chat if you have questions along the talk. You don't have to wait until the end. Yes, and we'll talk about, have the questions and answers at the end of Angelique's talk. Thank you very much, Angelique.
Okay, perfect. So hi everyone, Kalispera from Thessaloniki, Greece. Today I will speak about the socio-cultural and cognitive aspects of gender. I've worked on this topic for a number of years, and I want to share part of this intellectual adventure with you. Although my talk will be about linguistics, I've chosen a non-linguistic way to kickstart my presentation, which may be bizarre, but it's not irrelevant to our topic. In his book on epistemology, We Have Never Been Modern, Bruno Latour wonders whether the ozone layer is an object of study for chemistry, meteorology, politics, or economics, or whether it constitutes a hybrid, that is a sort of cultural, natural network that transgresses disciplinary boundaries and combines elements of knowledge from different disciplines. Very similar to Latour's ozone layer example, language, cognition, and culture can be conceptualized as a sort of hybrid that transgresses subdisciplinary boundaries in linguistics, as language creates a wide range of interconnections with culture and cognition. Today, I want to see how these interconnections can manifest themselves in interaction by focusing on a specific grammatical feature, gender. But first, let's delineate the different meanings of gender. And let's start with grammatical gender. Grammatical gender is an inherent property of the noun. It controls grammatical agreement between the noun and other elements in the noun phrase or the predicate. And in human reference, grammatical gender assignment is sex-based, meaning that nouns denoting female humans are grammatically feminine, and nouns denoting male humans are grammatically masculine. And this match between grammatical gender and reference sex is depicted in examples 1a and 1b from Greek. Athletes, male athlete, is grammatically masculine. Athletria, female athlete, is grammatically feminine. Lexical gender refers to the lexical marking of nouns as female or male specific. For instance, the English nouns mother and sister carry the semantic property of femaleness, whereas the nouns father and brother carry the semantic property of maleness. And of course, this does not apply to nouns such as citizen, patient, or individual, which are gender indefinite. Another term is natural gender or sex. Sex refers to the anatomical and biological differences between female and male humans. This binary sexual split, which may not always be clear-cut, is used as the basis on which social gender, sociocultural gender is built. Sociocultural gender refers to social constructions such as behaviors, attitudes, and norms taken to be associated with biological differences. Or to quote a nice definition provided by Rosi Braidotti, gender refers to the many and complex ways in which social differences between the sexes acquire a meaning and become structural factors in the organization of social life. Gender is a cultural product, it's a historical product, it's not a static essence that we simply have, okay? And according to Judith Butler, gender is performative. It is the outcome of repeated practices, material and symbolic practices, linguistic practices. In a nutshell, the questions that we will tackle today are the following. What is the relationship between grammatical and lexical gender and the construction of social gender? Do gender terms generate inferences about the social gender order and mediate speakers' thinking of the social world? Can we explore conceptualizations of gender in spoken language in interaction? What is the cognitive effect of the generic use of the masculine gender? And what are the cognitive mechanisms underlying gender inequality? And to answer these questions, I will build on the work that I have done on this topic over the years. I give you some references here, and you can check them out if you're interested when this transmission is over. And here is the itinerary that we will follow today. In the first part of my talk, I will describe the semantics of gender. Then I will discuss the relation between culture and gender, the relation between cognition and gender. And in the second part of my talk, I will explore with you how the gender culture cognition complex manifests itself in spoken language and interaction, drawing on Greek data. And I will conclude with some general remarks. So let's start with the semantics of gender. Let's start with grammar. Gender systems attracted linguists' attention early on, and the excellent descriptions of gender systems can be found in Corbett 1991, in Eichenwald 2000. Here I will follow Eichenwald's work on classifiers, and based on this framework, we can define grammatical gender as a type of classifier system, which categorizes nouns and nominals. Noun classes or genders are grammaticalized agreement systems which correlate with certain semantic characteristics, such as sex, animacy, or humanness, and they are realized outside the noun itself. The grammatical category of gender is present in most Indo-European languages. Genders are present in Northwest Caucasian languages, in African languages, in Papuan languages of the Sepik area, in Australian languages, among others. Yet several languages lack gender systems, as we know. These include most Austronesian languages, Turkic languages, Ralic languages, as well as Creole and Pidgin languages. They don't have genders. Okay, what about the number of noun classes across various languages? This varies. For example, Bantu languages in Africa have 8 to 10 noun classes. Hinuk, a language spoken in Western Dagestan in the Caucasus, which has been documented by Diana Forker, has 5 genders. Dirba, spoken in North Queensland, Australia, documented by Bob Dixon back in the 70s, has 4 genders. There are only 3 genders in German and Modern Greek, 2 genders in Spanish and French. And these small systems of 2 or 3 noun classes found in many Indo-European languages are referred as genders or grammatical genders. And these small systems always include the feminine and the masculine. Here I give you 2 examples, one from Spanish in example 3. Spanish, as you know, has 2 genders, feminine and masculine. Le libro, book, is grammatically masculine, and la casa, house, is grammatically feminine. In German, nouns are divided into 3 genders, masculine, feminine, and neuter. Der Platz is grammatically masculine, place. Die Entscheidung, decision, is grammatically feminine. Das Haus is grammatically neuter. Noun class systems have 2 definitional properties. First of all, some constituent outside the noun itself, such as adjectives, numbers, demonstratives, articles, in the noun phrase and or in the clause, must agree in a noun class with a noun. The second property is that nouns are assigned to specific classes according to semantic and sometimes according to morphological and phonological principles. Noun class assignment has always a semantic basis, which usually relates to animacy, humanness, and sex, and sometimes also shape and size. Let's have a look at a few examples here. The first one comes from Dirbal. In Dirbal, nouns are categorized in 4 classes, one for male reference and non-human animates, one for female reference, fire, water, and battle, one for non-protein food, and another one for the rest, all the rest. Manambu, a language spoken in the Sepik area of New Guinea, documented by Eichenwald. In Manambu, nouns are assigned genders according to sex, shape, and size. Masculine gender, for example, is associated with longer shape and larger size, whereas feminine gender is associated with rounder shape and smaller size. In many Indo-European languages, including Spanish, German, Italian, Portuguese, and Greek, nouns, there is a match between grammatical gender and referent sex. So nouns denoting female humans are usually grammatically feminine, whereas nouns denoting male humans are usually grammatically masculine. And we've seen one example already from Greek, athletes, athletria, male athlete, female athlete. So here in person reference, gender assignment is semantically motivated. And the 3 volumes edited by Hellinger and Buschmann in 2001, 2002, 2003, and the 4th volume edited by Hellinger and Bottom-Baker in 2015 are excellent resources on this topic. Now, while gender assignment in nouns with human reference is clearly semantically motivated, gender assignment in nouns with inanimate reference is semantically arbitrary. For example, there seems to be no semantic principle for the categorization of son as masculine in Greek, as feminine in German, and as neuter in Russian. Besides semantic principles, morphological and phonological principles can also play an important role in gender assignment. In Greek, for instance, some masculine nouns end in as, is, or us, and some feminine nouns end in a, I, or u. In Hinuk, there is a correlation between the initial segment of a noun and its gender, but here I want to skip this part and move on to some preliminary remarks about gender in person reference. Okay, so grammatical gender and person reference. Grammatical gender is used for solving reference problems. Such problems may involve achieving generic reference, solving coordination problems, and maintaining reference. Let's start with generic reference. Generic reference is reference to female and male reference or to reference whose sex is unknown. Languages use different means to deal with this problem. And in many Indo-European languages, including Greek, the masculine grammatical gender is used for a generic reference. And that's illustrated with example 5, οι δάσκαλοι απεργούν, male teachers are on strike. The noun phrase οι δάσκαλοι is marked by the masculine gender and used for reference to all teachers, male and female teachers. The use of the masculine gender for generic reference is associated with markedness relations in noun class systems. A noun class is considered functionally unmarked if it's used as a generic term. In our example, obviously the masculine is functionally unmarked. Now, what about solving coordination problems? Functional markedness in noun class systems is related with a problem of coordination of nouns belonging to different noun classes, or what is referred as noun class resolution. Resolution may follow semantic principles, syntactic principles, or a combination of both. For example, in Portuguese, and you know that better than I do, okay, you're native speakers, the Brazilian audience, I mean. In Portuguese, the problem of noun class resolution is solved syntactically. If a noun phrase consists of two nouns belonging to different genders, the conflict is resolved in favor of the functionally unmarked gender that is in favor of the masculine. O menino e uma menina bonitos, beautiful boy and girl, bonitos is grammatically masculine, and the same holds for Greek. If a noun phrase consists of two nouns belonging to different genders and denoting male and female human beings, the conflict is resolved in favor of the masculine, as example 7 shows. Ο φοιτητής και η φοιτήτρια είναι πολύ χαρούμενοι. The male student and the female student are very happy. Χαρούμενοι is happy is grammatically masculine. The third problem that is resolved through the use of grammatical gender is maintaining reference to some entity, to the same entity. Gender systems are reference tracking systems. They are systems that we use to keep track of the various entities referred to in an ongoing discourse. In this sense, noun phrases of the same gender are considered to be co-referential, while noun phrases of different gender cannot. For example, in this sentence here in example 8, η Μαρία πήγε στο σπίτι της. The feminine pronoun της is co-referential with the feminine noun phrase Maria. That is, the feminine pronoun, the anaphor, selects as its referent the same person depicted initially by the feminine noun, the antecedent. Okay, what's the upshot? Based on what we have discussed so far, we can conclude that the semantic distinction of female-male sex is grammaticized in languages with gender systems. There is a process of gendering discourse, and the question is, what are the social aspects of gendering discourse? And I will turn to this question now, gender and culture. What is the relation between the two? And in order to understand the social implications, the social work done by gender terms, I will draw on the concept of indexicality as discussed, as defined by Eleanor Ochs in her work in 1992. Linguistic items which are grammatically and or lexically specified for female or male sex operate as referential indexes of gender according to Ochs. That is, the index gender referentially, directly, and exclusively, the index gender via the referential content. Gender terms ascribe female or male sex to referent, and they presuppose and invoke common knowledge and presumptions about the binary gender order. The information of referent gender is part of the routine meanings communicated in interaction. And it encompasses gender ideologies in general, that is systems of beliefs about typical feminine and masculine roles, typical feminine and masculine traits and behaviors, and power structures. And these power structures include men's dominance and women's subordination, as well as heteronormativity. As Hellinger and Bussmann point out, in person reference, the basic function of such items is to communicate gendered messages of various types. And these messages, these gendered messages, involve the construction of gender identities and the maintenance of gender hierarchy. We can examine each in turn. Let's start with gender identities. Well, the role of gender terms in constructing gender has been examined by feminist conversation analysis, and Celia Kitchinger is a prominent figure in this framework. These studies draw on Harvey Sachs' notion of membership categories to describe gender terms. Membership categories are tools that we use to label ourselves and other people. The addressee or other third parties. They are classifications of various kinds, organized into larger groupings or collections of categories, such as sex, age, religion, profession, ethnicity, and so on and so forth. Membership categories are inference reads. They are fueled by the common sense knowledge, the background knowledge that we share about the world, the sociocultural world. And they are also associated with category-bound activities. That is, activities which are stereotypically associated with members of specific categories. Okay, we have knowledge about what are the typical forms of conduct that members of a category engage with. Okay, what are the specific characteristics that members of a category have? Prior conversation analytic work has shown that gendered assumptions are routinely displayed in the course of actions through the deployment of gender membership categories. For example, Celia Kitchinger, in a study that she published in 2005, has demonstrated that the nouns husband and wife in English conversation denote specific roles in the heterosexual kin system and make the inference of reference heterosexual identity available in interaction, either in topic talk about heterosexual relationships or in the course of activities that do not explicitly index heterosexual relationships. Yet, on certain occasions, gendered assumptions may be brought to the surface of the talk. For example, when speakers correct heterosexist presumptions. And there is a study published by Land and Kitchinger on this practice in 2005. Okay, speakers may use gender terms to overcome gender dichotomies and express gender fluidity, as shown for the Hydras community in India by Kira Hall and Veronica O'Donovan in 1996, or as shown for transvestites in South Brazil by Borba and Osterman in 2007. Let's move on to gender hierarchy. Grammatical gender constructs social gender on the basis of social hierarchy, and this is done via the semantic derogation of women. We know that female-specific nouns tend to carry negative connotations compared to the male-specific counterparts. And it's also the gender hierarchy is also accomplished via the generic use of the masculine. As I mentioned before, the masculine gender is functionally unmarked in Greek and in other Indo-European languages, yet this choice is socially regulated, as many feminist linguists have argued and have shown. The speaker here in 5, for example, uses the masculine gender as the default gender for reference to all professors, male plus female teachers, didaskali, presupposing the stereotypical association of man as norm. And what passes as a gender-neutral choice is in fact an exclusionary practice that reflects the ideology of man as norm, man as the universal human subject, and woman as the deviant and subordinate other. This pattern is demonstrated in several languages, It's common across various languages. It's not universal. There are a few languages, a few Australian languages, and some other languages where the feminine gender is the functionally unmarked gender, not the masculine one. Sorry, there is a dog barking outside. Okay. Researchers claiming that language constructs social gender and maintains gender inequality often tacitly presuppose or imply that language has a cognitive role, that language mediates the way in which speakers interpret experience. Okay. However, cognition is rarely addressed explicitly in language and gender research. Now, if we return to our hybrid, our grammar culture cognition hybrid, we can now say that there is a large number of in-depth works on the relation between gendered language structures and social gender, yet there has been no attempt to offer a systematic account of the cognitive aspects of this relation. The question is, what is the relation between grammatical gender and speakers' cognition? Let's dive into this question, gender and cognition. And of course, that's a tricky one because, as you know, there is no straightforward answer to the question of how language relates to cognition. Non-formalist approaches, the ones that we find in linguistic anthropology or cognitive linguistics and cultural linguistics, treat language as an embodied and socially embedded phenomenon grounded on social action, a phenomenon that mediates conceptualization. And we could say that language is embedded in culture and cognition in such a profound way that linguocentrism seems inevitable. To quote Nick Enfield here, his view on the matter. John Lucid describes this idea as semiotic relativity. According to semiotic relativity, language is a semiotic system that mediates speakers' experience of the world. And this more general sort of relativity is presupposed when we talk about the correlation of grammatical categories and speakers' interpretations of experience. What is known as structural relativity. You think of Boas here, his view that grammar determines those aspects of its experience that must be expressed, or that concepts that get grammaticized in a language tend to be conceptually salient for the speakers of this language. And these ideas can also be found in Sapir's work and Worf's work. A recent reformulation of the structural relativity hypothesis is found in Slobin, 1996 and 2003. According to the thinking for speaking hypothesis, speakers choose to codify particular aspects of experience depending on what is grammaticized in the language they speak. So language mediates speakers' cognition, at least at the time of speaking. Now, if we take research on linguistic relativity into consideration, we arrive at a series of hypotheses or assumptions about the cognitive role of grammatical gender. In languages with sex-based gender systems, the concepts of female sex and male sex are grammaticized. Therefore, they tend to become conceptually salient for speakers of these languages. Gender is expected to guide speakers' thinking about the world, at least at the time of speaking. When we use a language with a sex-based gender, our thinking is attuned to the conceptual distinction of sex. Do we have empirical evidence for this cognitive role of gender? Well, we do, okay? Empirical evidence for the correlation between grammatical gender and the interpretation of referent sex as female or male comes from studies in psycholinguistics, sociolinguistics, cognitive and social psychology. These studies indicate the correlation between grammatical gender and the interpretation of referent sex as female or male. I give you some references here. A common finding reported by these studies is the correlation between the generic use of the masculine gender and the speakers' strong tendency to interpret reference as male. Masculine forms tend to guide speakers towards gender-specific interpretations rather than generic interpretation. That's a common finding emerging from these studies. Interestingly, the correlation between grammatical gender and the interpretation of sex and person reference is so strong that it can be also extended to the conceptualization of the inanimate world as female or male. When speakers personify inanimate objects according to the grammatical gender of the noun denoting these items. An indication of this pattern is presented here. Okay, have a look at Liberty Leading the People by Delacroix. Liberty has been portrayed as female, and it's interesting that in Latin and the Romance languages, the word for liberty is grammatically feminine. But besides the conceptual distinction of sex, what other kinds of conceptualizations do gender categories prompt? Let's see how cognitive linguistics can help us shed light on the inferences generated by grammatical gender categories. Grammatical gender and conceptual categorization, that is the question. And Lakoff's approach to conceptual categorization will be our starting point for exploring how grammatical gender is related to speakers' thinking. Conceptual categories are organized on the basis of prototypes, of cognitive reference points. According to this view, categories have fuzzy boundaries. They consist of more representative prototypical members and less representative peripheral members. And they are linked with structures of knowledge known as idealized cognitive models. Idealized cognitive models are metonymic if they include concepts A and B, which are associated metonymically. That is, B, which is either part of A or is closely associated with A, stands for A. Social stereotypes, of course, are typical cases of metonymy, in which one member of the category is used as a vehicle for understanding the category as a whole. What's interesting here is that Lakoff also investigates the relation between noun classes and conceptual categorization. And in fact, he's using the noun class system in Dürbel as one of his examples. And he claims that noun classes are conceptual categories with prototypical and peripheral members. Let's see how we can build on this framework. Following his approach, we may hypothesize that the masculine and feminine grammatical gender categories in Greek or in other languages that have sex-based gender systems, the masculine, these noun classes are conceptual categories. The masculine and feminine gender categories are conceptual categories, and they have prototypical and peripheral members. Male and female humans are prototypical members in the masculine and the feminine gender categories, respectively, and other inanimate entities could be treated as peripheral members in the masculine and the feminine categories. Moreover, gender categories rely on metonymy. Okay, more specifically, metonymy can help us understand how the generic use of the masculine operates. The generic use of the masculine depends on the stereotypical assumption that man is the universal category, that man is the norm. This sociocultural stereotype structures the category human by defining which members are taken to be prototypical in this category, which members are taken to be less representative in this category. Given our knowledge about gender hierarchy, it's reasonable to assume that male humans are prototypes or cognitive reference points for the category human, while female humans are peripheral members. Moreover, the stereotype can be said to form a metonymic cognitive model on which the generic use of the masculine is based. Let's see how this model is structured. Okay, the model consists of the following elements: the concept of human universal that needs to be understood for some purpose in some context, the cultural association of human universal with male sex, man is the prototypical human, and the concept of male sex, which is part of the category human universal. Male sex, which is morphologically qualified, activates metonymically the category of human universal and guides speakers to interpret references not exclusively male. And the masculine generic associated inference, man as norm, is produced as a sort of default inference, or in Levinson's terms, a presumptive meaning in communication, okay, spoken or written discourse. this is how metonymy is the mechanism underlying the generic use of the masculine. Gendered terms can give rise to different types of inferences, of course. And here I would like to draw our attention to another type of inference, which is associated with gender terms. Conceptual baggage. Conceptual baggage is a term that Sally McConnell-Genet used in a paper that she published in Language in 2008. Conceptual baggage refers to connotations, encyclopedic knowledge, stereotypes or prototypes, background assumptions, knowledge about social practices in the course of which the word gets used. And they can, conceptual baggage can potentially trigger hearer-based inferences, which are not always intended by speakers. That's the crucial part. They are not always intended by speakers, but they can be unpacked by the hearer. Here in example 10, you can see what conceptual baggage looks like. I saw the nurse who was looking after my dad. What did she say? Okay, well, imagine that there is this dialogue. And if I tell you that I saw the nurse who was looking after my dad, and you reply, what did she say? Your response displays your hearer-based inference that the nurse is female. Although the noun nurse is not lexically specified for sex, female sex, you interpret the referent as female, drawing on the stereotypical association of this occupation with women. And as Eckert and McConnell-Genet observe, the evidence for conceptual baggage attached to an expression lies in hearers' responses, which show that what they presuppose after hearing the conceptual baggage invoking expression. So terms like husband and wife, or woman and man, or other gender terms also carry their own conceptual baggage that can be accessed in interaction on certain occasions in specific contexts. Now that we have a better understanding of how gender, culture, and cognition interrelate, let's examine empirically this complex intersection of gender, culture, and cognition in spoken language and interaction, drawing on Greek data, and the empirical investigation of grammatical gender in spoken language in interaction is interesting, particularly interesting for two reasons. First of all, interaction plays a pivotal role in pulling society together, right? There is no society without interaction. And here I quote Mani Sheglov's take on that. The fundamental, in his words, the fundamental or primordial scene of social life is that of direct interaction between members of a social species, typically ones who are physically co-present. For humans, talking in interaction appears to be a distinctive form of this primary constituent of social life, and ordinary conversation is very likely the basic form of organization for talk and interaction. So this is where in interaction is where the work of institutions gets done. And of course, social gender, gender regimes is one of the institutions, so to speak, and it emerges in interaction. The second reason comes from the work that Enfield and Levinson have done following their argument here. Interaction is the primary context for the externalization of cognitive processes. Interaction, we could say that interaction is a sort of a natural lab where we can observe what people usually do think and usually do experience, what they actually think and experience, at least when they think for speaking. To demonstrate how this grammar, culture, and cognition complex unfolds in token interaction, I will build on the findings of my previous work on indexing gender in person reference in Greek conversation. The data I will explore with you today originate from 26 hours of 40 audio recorded, naturally occurring, everyday face-to-face conversations among friends and relatives from the corpus of spoken Greek. I use the tools of conversation analysis for two reasons. First, I assume that private cognitive states, private cognitive processes, such as inferences, can be detected by looking at speakers' publicly observable behavior. And second, CA conversation analysis offers a methodological advantage when it comes to the analysis of hearer-based inferences and interaction. One of the basic principles of conversation analysis is that the speaker's next turn publicly displays their understanding of the actions of the just prior turn and embodies an action responsive to the just prior turn, so understood. And this principle can prove to be rather productive in our analysis, given that conceptual baggage is uncovered in hearers' responses, that is, in sequentially next turns. A few words about grammatical gender in Greek before we dive into the data. The gender system in Greek includes the masculine, feminine, and neuter, three noun classes. Gender is distinguished both in the singular and in the plural. Gender assignment in nouns with human reference is sex-based. We've said this before. The gender of the noun controls agreement with other elements in the noun phrase or outside the noun phrase. I give you two examples here. Also, lexical gender is found in Greek. Obviously, in certain nouns, reference sex is lexically specified. Γυναίκα, woman, koritsi, girl. They encode lexically the semantic property of femaleness, andras, agori, man, boy. They encode lexically the semantic property of maleness. And excellent descriptions of grammatical gender and lexical gender in relation to social gender can be found in Pavlidou 2003 and 2006. Okay, in Greek, gender membership categories in general include linguistic items that are grammatically masculine or grammatically feminine and or lexically specified for female or male sex. We can start looking at the data. Let's see what's happening when nothing special is happening in interaction, in talk and interaction. Usually the most interesting stuff is happening when nothing special is happening, when we take things for granted. Okay, often the deployment of gender membership categories in Greek conversation is not related to interlocutors' explicit orientation to social gender. So when speakers, usually when Greek speakers use gender membership categories, they do not orient gender as an important part of the social context because gender is everywhere in any case. Let's see how this is demonstrated in excerpts 1 and 2. Excerpt 1 comes from a conversation among Polyxeni, Vasilis and Natasa. They are all friends. Vasilis and Natasa are a married couple. In line 1, Polyxeni initiates a new topic, asking her co-participants, Vasilis and Natasa, how they have been coping with the bad weather. And Natasa and Vasilis respond in the next lines in a collaborative manner. In lines 2 and 3, Vasilis deploys the first person plural verbs pame, imastan, to refer to relational collectivity, a couple that includes himself and his wife, Natasa, so-and-so, we've been here since Saturday. And in line 4, Natasa continues the response that Vasilis started by using the masculine principle apoklesmeni, blocked, to describe the collectivity. And this response is brought to completion by Vasilis in lines 5 and 6, who repeats the masculine participle that Natasa used to describe the relational collectivity, blocked until Wednesday night. In this segment, nothing special is happening with respect to participants' gender identities. It's business as usual. Speakers get on with their usual business and use the male categorization of reference as a tool to achieve generic reference. Yet their utterances routinely construct a web of gendered inferences. In using the masculine gender for generic reference, speakers tacitly presuppose the stereotypical association of man with the norm as an unquestioned assumption about the way in which the ordinary social world is organized. Let's have a look at excerpt 2. Okay, Vaso here, in the course of a telling about memories from her early childhood years, Vaso, our speaker here, uses gendered kin terms embedded in noun phrases. Ti mamma mo, my mom. to babamo, my dad, to achieve recognitional reference to third parties. Maybe I can recall the events through stories told by my mom, my dad. Again, social gender is not interactionally relevant. However, the referring expressions consist of articles and nouns, which are grammatically and or lexically specified for female and male sex, and make gender available in interaction. Moreover, the kin terms denote normative roles in the heterosexual nuclear family, following Kitchinger's argument. The one I mentioned before. And the kin terms display heteronormativity as part of the tacit taken for granted assumptions that interlocutors share about the social world. Let's have a look at a less common pattern found in Greek conversation, when the use of gender membership categories introduce the relevance of gender in talk and interaction and lead to social actions that display speakers' background, gendered assumptions and conceptualizations. They are inferences, more specifically, the masculine generic associated inference, manes norm, which is illustrated with excerpt 3, and heteronormativity is part of the conceptual baggage associated with gender membership categories, illustrated with excerpt 4. In segment 3, I will examine a self-initiated self-repair in which the masculine grammatical gender is the repairable item. So we need to say a few things about repair in case you're not familiar with it. Repair refers to a set of systematically organized practices through which participants manage trouble in talk, trouble in speaking, hearing and understanding. The particular segment of talk to which the repairable is addressed is the trouble source or the repairable item. A self-initiated self-repair is initiated and carried through by the speaker of the trouble source. And in self-repair, speakers perform some operation upon the repairable item, such as replacing an item by another, inserting an item into the prior talk, deleting an item from the prior talk, or reordering words or phrases. And self-repairs are interesting cognition-wise because, according to Drew, Walker, and Ogden, 2013, self-repairs give analysts access to the work of constructing a turn by bringing to the interactional surface the talk in which speakers engage in order to construct the action. Let's see how this applies to grammatical gender and cognition in real conversational time. Here in this conversational exchange, there are three friends, three female participants, Vasho, Yana, and Katerina. Yana and Katerina are sisters. In the lines preceding this segment, the three participants talk about whether they used to go to children's camp when they were young. Yana and her sister Katerina, who used to go, assess the experience as a positive one. In lines 1 and 2, Yana delivers a negative assessment of Katerina's competence in staying at the children's camp for a long time. You're not the type of person who can stay at a camp for a long time. And then in line 3, Katerina disagrees and initiates a storytelling, treating Yana's prior turn as a story provocation. It's not that I went to a kids' camp when I was very young, when we used to go to Psakudia with our parents. And this is an assisted storytelling that establishes both Yana and Katerina as story consociates who are able to jointly deliver the story as they share common knowledge about the story events. This common knowledge is based on their sister relation. So the sister relation has become interactionally relevant. And in fact, it was Yana's first assessment in lines 1 and 2 that made the sister identity interactionally relevant. Let's see how this is done. In two studies published in 2005 and 2006, Heritage and Raymond showed that first assessments in first position carry an implied claim that the speaker has primary rights to evaluate the matter assessed. They can be used as resources for indexing speakers' epistemic rights and also invoking identities in interaction. Here, in assessing Katerina's behavior, Jana claims an epistemic right for herself. That is, this epistemic right is associated with her identity as Katerina's sister. Her assessment evokes the relevance of her identity as Katerina's sister. And this relevance of the sister identity is maintained via the assisted storytelling in the next lines. In lines 5, 7, and 8, Jana participates in the course of story delivery through story consociate initiated entry. She repairs trouble in story elaboration by giving more information about the exact age that she and Katerina had at the time of the story events. The storytelling goes on. You can see here in lines 10, 11, 12, 14, 16, 17. And in lines 19 and 20, Jana repairs trouble in the facts of the story again by correcting both her and Katerina's age again. Jana's turn in lines 19 and 20 consists of a turn constructional unit. Ήμασταν πιο μεγάλοι τότε. We were older then. Μεγάλοι, old, is grammatically masculine. And an increment comes after the possible completion of the TCU. Πιο μεγάλες, old, grammatically feminine. And this increment delivers the self-repair. Okay, Jana refers to herself and her sister via a first-person plural verb, ήμασταν. She describes the female reference via the masculine adjective, μεγάλη, presupposing the inference of human universal associated with the masculine gender. And in the transition space, after the possible completion of the TCU, the turn constructional unit, Jana does a self-repair. She replaces the masculine adjective with a feminine one that ascribes female sex to reference and also preframes the repairable item by repeating the adverb πιο, more. The question is what triggers the self-repair of grammatical gender here, not this specific moment. As I mentioned already, Jana's assessment has introduced the sister identity as a relevant aspect of the context here. The relevance of the sister identity was maintained throughout the sequence due to the assisted storytelling that established both Jana and Katerina as story consociates with common knowledge of the story events. In delivering a story consociate initiated entry in lines 19 and 20, Jana carries out an action which is related to the relevance of her identity as Katerina's sister. Jana is entitled to repair trouble in story elaboration because she shares common knowledge with her sister Katerina. The relevance of reference sister identity, which is conceptually marked for female sex, does not align with the grammatically masculine item that categorizes Jana and Katerina as male. This is the reason why Jana selects a grammatically feminine item that ascribes female sex to reference. It's an attempt to incorporate the relevance of female sex and interaction. And of course, this in turn uncovers the cognitive role of grammatical gender. The self-repair could be interpreted by us, the analysts, as an indication of the role of the masculine grammatical gender. When speakers think for speaking, the self-repair shows how the generic use of the masculine works. The masculine generic associated inference man as norm relies on the categorization of reference as male. So the self-repair indicates the mechanism, discloses the mechanism that triggers, that underlies the generic use of the masculine. And the thing here is that the male, the conceptual distinction of male sex is present. It's there, and suddenly it's disclosed. That's the interesting part. Okay, let's move on to our last example, excerpt 4. Some theoretical preliminaries again. In a study on American English conversation, Hopper and LeBaron, that Hopper and LeBaron conducted in 1998, they demonstrated that gender social gender creeps into talk and becomes a relevant feature of the context through a noticing series, which consists of a peripheral gendered activity whereby gender is implicitly indexed as a relevant part of the context. Gendered noticing, whereby gender is indexed explicitly and referentially, and extending of gender's relevance. So gender becomes a resource for subsequent talk. This noticing series is also found in example 4. In this conversational exchange, there are 3 female participants and 1 male participant. Tanya, Zoe, and Evangelia, the 3 female participants, and Dimitris is the male participant. And in line 4, Tanya nominates a topic via an itemized news inquiry. Ο Χριστός τι κάνει, how is Christos? Itemized news inquiries are oriented to a recipient-related newsworthy item of which the speaker has some knowledge. The use of the initial recognitional reference form, that is the male proper name Christos, indicates that both speaker and recipients know the reference identity. In delivering an itemized news inquiry about Christos, Tanya orients to Christos activities as possibly news generational. And in line 7, Zoe provides a no news response. Ο Χριστός καλά είναι, Christos is fine. Evangelia initiates a repair sequence to resolve trouble in recognizing the referent in line 8. Ποιος είναι ο Χριστός, who is Christos? Zoe delivers the repair. Δεν τον ξέρεις, we don't know him, in line 9. And in lines 10 and 11, Melita summons Tanya and Zoe via the vocative, κορίτσια, girls, and requests information about Christos' identity, orienting to Christos' identity as a newsworthy item. She uses a first-person plural verb to refer to self as part of a collectivity lacking knowledge about Christos. Κορίτσια, θέλουμε πλήρη ενημέρωση. Girls, we want a full update. Ποιος είναι ο Χριστός? Who is Christos? This collectivity, introduced via the first-person plural verb, unavoidably includes Evangelia and Dimitris, the guy, okay, the male participant. Tanya's itemized news inquiry in line 4 and Melita's request for information in lines 10 and 11 implicitly index heteronormativity according to which women are interested in men. These actions constitute a peripheral gendered activity or a category-bound activity that prepares the ground for the gendered noticing in line 13. In line 13, Dimitris notices that Christos is a boy. Είναι και αγόρι, but he's a boy, huh? He delivers a declarative assertion that consists of a copula clause, delivered emphatically with final rising intonation, seeking confirmation from the co-participants. The speaker ascribes male sex to the third person via the noun agori, boy. Agori is lexically specified for male sex. The use of the gender membership category indicates that gender is a feature of context that has become interactionally relevant. The speaker attends to the reference male gender and brings heteronormativity to focused attention. Gender relevance is extended in the next turns. Co-participants understand Dimitris' turn as a complaint that he should not be included in the collectivity of co-participants interested in Christos. Evangelia suggests that Dimitri can talk about girls. In line 14, εσύ θα μας πεις για κορίτσια, you will tell us about girls. And Melita apologizes to Dimitris, συγγνώμη, sorry. In line 16. Thus, the gender noticing is extended into a series of responses by Evangelia and Melita, which acknowledge that the topic is not newsworthy for Dimitris, who is a man and therefore is expected to be interested in women. So in this excerpt, gender creeps into the talk through a peripheral gendered activity in which gender heteronormativity is implicitly indexed. The gender noticing delivered by the speaker explicitly indexes gender as a relevant part of the context, and the relevance of gender is maintained in the next turns. In this three-phase action series, participants position themselves and others as heterosexual women and men. They presuppose heteronormativity in the peripheral gendered activity and bring it to focused attention via the gendered noticing and in the aftermath of the noticing. In this extract, heteronormativity is a hearer-based inference associated with the use of the male name Christos that the hearer unpacks in his response in line 13. Heteronormativity is not part of the meaning that speakers intend to communicate. It's not the main job that their utterances were doing. However, it's made salient, it's made accessible by the use of the gender term in that specific context. What can we conclude? The empirical analysis of gender systems in person reference in real conversational time, in spoken language and interaction, shows that the referential indexing of gender is a cognitively rich process. In interaction, we can find indications of the correlation between grammatical gender and the interpretation of referent sex. We can also find indications of the inferences triggered by gendered terms. Gender ideologies are anchored in the use of gender terms and fuel inferences about reference, which sustain and reproduce the dominant gender order. Eckert and McConnell-Genet make an insightful observation about how power works in discourse. Once planted, common sense can be hard to shift, even hard to detect, as it can become so embedded in ways of talking and acting that it is hidden, hard for our reflective selves to access. Here I've shown how we can shed light on the embedded aspects of common sense by zooming in on the use of gendered terms. The use of grammatical and lexical gender is a micro-technique through which speakers become habituated to a social gender system that is oppressive and unequal. Of course, these findings foreground feminist language reform practices as an essential part of our feminist political agendas. Language is a tool that we can use to create a room of our own, as Virginia Woolf would have liked us to do, a tool that we can use to subvert regimes of power, regimes of subordination, express gender fluidity, redesign our feminine condition, and represent female difference in positive ways. And this thought brings me to the end of my presentation. So thank you all for attending. Thank you for the invitation. I hope the transmission was good, and I look forward to answering any questions. If you have any, please ask. So I will stop sharing my screen.
Thank you very much, Angeliki. That was fabulous. So instigating. Thank you so much. I actually have to look at another window here to see the questions that are coming up. Yes, there are questions. I was paying attention to your talk, so I was not looking at them simultaneously, but let's go in the order that they have been asked, if that's all right. Joana Restelli Ferla, her question is, how would this structural relativity function in affect a multilingual speaking individual?
Oh, that's a complicated question, I guess. But here in the data that I have analyzed come from monolingual speakers, so to speak. I don't know if any speaker is really monolingual, but yeah, I did not look into that, into the effect, the grammatical gender effects on the minds of bilingual or multilingual speakers. It's a different topic. The question is very good, but it relates to a different topic.
Yeah, probably that was triggered by your bio, in which I said that you're looking at immigrants and stuff.
Yeah, I haven't looked into structural relativity in relation to multilingualism.
Right.
It's a fascinating topic, but I haven't looked into it, no.
Yeah, thank you. So Eurico Myers, good afternoon. Thank you for such an interesting talk. How do you think languages are changing to include gender non-conformist structures, if at all? Yeah, that's kind of along the lines I'd like to ask too. But
yeah, because that was also the upshot in a way. I mean, what can we do in order to eliminate social sexism and linguistic sexism? Yeah, languages are changing because speakers are changing. Their attitudes and their mindset. So yeah, language can be a tool that we can use to eliminate social sexism. And there have been different strategies. They have been proposed by feminist linguists, like gender specification or gender neutralization. And you will also be familiar in Portuguese. We are familiar in Greek with how these practices work. You can either use both the masculine and the feminine to achieve generic reference, or you can avoid marking, denoting female sex or male sex. So you can get rid of male and male sex altogether. But these strategies can be applied to different extents in different languages. So in German, it would be relatively easy to apply gender neutralization, mainly because there is a plural participle that makes no distinction between the masculine and the feminine, but that's not the case for Greek. Where gender is distinguished both in the singular and in the plural. And it's quite hard, in spoken discourse, it's quite hard to apply gender specification, for instance, consistently when you speak. It's quite difficult. In saying that, maybe feminization, the use of the feminine gender to achieve generic reference could be an alternative strategy used in specific context by particular speakers. Maybe feminization would be a sort of, strategic essentialism, to remember Spivak here, that can challenge the patriarchal symbolic economy that theorizes man as the norm and a woman as the negative and subordinate other. So languages are changing slowly, bit by bit. But okay, we know that language is very important. We know that language constructs social reality, construes the way we experience the world and mediates our thinking. Okay, we know all these things. But the role of language in constructing social reality is more important today than ever. I would like to underline this point. Because we live in an era of cognitive capitalism, this knowledge-driven economy, the knowledge-based economy, informational economies, which make culture and cognition significant. They make culture and discourse particularly significant in economic production and economic consumption. And they foreground the role of language. There is a language turn, there is a cultural turn taking place today in the third millennium. So all these things, this context in which we find ourselves today, foregrounds the role of language as a political strategy to accomplish social and political change, much more than it used to. And it invites us to reconsider verbal hygiene, term that belongs to Deborah Cameron, as an important site for our political struggle and our academic feminism, which could be a sort of political activism. It's a good question, yeah. And I hope I have answered the question.
Thank you, thank you. One more question here. Okay, the name, Panayota Milioni. Sorry if I'm not pronouncing this correctly, so sorry. Should linguists encourage inclusive writing like in French? Intéressé, and then the EXS, okay, even though they can be considered unreadable. Oh, that's also very interesting. Thank you for the question.
Thank you, Panayota. Yes, you can encourage such usages in written discourse. they are tools for political struggle, okay, and they are part of these feminist language reform initiatives. And of course, they promote the gender fair language and the gender fair world, I suppose. So we encourage these practices, certainly, as long as they do not end into a debate about political correctness. Is it good? Is it bad? What are we going to do? Okay, you need to have political subjects who are active, who use language in specific ways because they want to promote a society, so a gender order which is governed by equality, right? A gender fair world. So it's a tool that we can use in academic writing and in writing in general. Yeah, so the answer is yes. Do it, go for it.
It should be encouraged, yeah.
Yeah.
So, super. More questions coming up. Are you okay to answer?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
Not?
So, Marina Kirsch, I would like to know, what is the linguistic and talking interaction agenda, short and long term, considering the issues of grammar, culture, cognition, and gender? You can include your agenda as well, she says.
That's true. Look, the role of gendered linguistic structures has been analyzed in early feminist linguistic work in the late 70s, in the early 80s. Then attention shifted from language as use system, as grammar, to language as use, because there was a discourse turn, there was a performance turn that took place in feminist theory and also in language and gender research. But still there is interest in the role that gender linguistic structures play. I mean, conversation analysis, feminist conversation analysis has also foregrounded the role of gender membership categories in talk and interaction. These people were not linguists, but they contributed to this language and gender enterprise in significant ways. The future of this project, I don't know. I mean, I started working on this topic. I was interested in cognition in relation to gender systems and culture. I guess that other scholars working on languages with sex-based gender systems or different types of gender systems, it would be fascinating to see how these different levels, grammar, culture, and cognition interrelate. We will see what the future holds for us, I guess. But that's a short history of the field. And of course, Anna Christina Osterman has done beautiful, fascinating work on the topic. I've cited 2 papers that she has written. When the transmission is over, please freeze the video and have a look.
Okay, thank you. And then, well, people are thanking and congratulating you for your work. And Juan Pablo Mora has another question here. Excuse me. I have a question about the few languages that you mentioned that use feminine as generic. Oh, that's also interesting. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you know,
I know.
if there is research showing whether in those languages there is also woman as norm? Yes, interesting. We need to study, guys.
I know. It's such a good question. I'm also wondering myself. I know. There are a few Australian languages. Eichenwald, in her book on classifiers, has a list of languages in which the feminine gender is used as the functionally unmarked one. There are a few Australian languages. There is a language spoken in southern Amazonia, Jarawara, I think, if I remember correctly, analyzed by Bob Dixon, I believe. And then Manambu, spoken in Papua New Guinea. In Manambu, the feminine gender is functionally unmarked for non-humans, but not for humans. These languages have not been analyzed by sociolinguists. They have been documented by typologists, people working in anthropological linguistics. So if you want to do field work, these are beautiful sites to go and see. You know, we need to go and explore and see how does the feminine gender works in these cases when it's used to achieve generic reference. So is this scenario of metonymy that I presented applicable in these cases? Is a woman really the norm? Will we find something that challenges the way we view the masculine gender in generic reference? I don't know. It's a promising topic, a promising site for future research.
Yeah, and for that, of course, it would be beautiful to have recordings of naturally occurring interactions to see how people might dispute those as well.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly, Anna. Yeah, it's a very good point. Which is also an important thing to mention, that if you are documenting endangered languages, make sure that you record data, audio and video record data, because it's really necessary for us to have access to such data, and they enrich your analysis so much, and you start understanding how language works in a different way. And we really need conversational data from endangered languages, because it's all English dominated. It's been until now, at least. So yeah.
Yeah. Yes, English and largely spoken languages too, and not this Aboriginal languages and Angeliki, well, let me see if we have more questions here. Many thanks, congratulations, etc. I just wanted to pick one little detail in your last excerpt, and you don't have to show it again, but it was the vocative girls. That I thought, well, that was also interesting because so it was by the choice of the vocative, they were already choosing who was categorized.
Yeah. So it's the vocative was used to address the two girls who had knowledge of that guy Christos.
Okay, so by the male participant.
Yeah, but the male, they were addressing the two female participants. When Melita uses Koritzia, she addresses the two female participants that have knowledge of that guy, Christos, the third party being referred to. And then she uses a first person plural verb that does collective self-reference, and the male guy objects. You know, he's a boy, I'm not interested. That was the implicature there.
Yeah, that's lovely to see also in interaction. And are they teenagers? Because that seems like to be a kind of
very young, in their early 20s. Yeah, early 20s.
Yes, perfect also place to be checking natural conversations too in terms of gender too. Yeah, it's a site, a very rich site for that. Yes, let me see. Yes, there is still one more here. Joel Espejo. Is there any research observing whether people are nowadays questioning the relationship between grammatical gender and people's sex, gender, and sexuality?
Gender and sexuality. Yeah, there are people looking at how grammatical gender is used by, do you mean like third gender people? I guess that's the question. Yeah. Kira Hall and O'Donovan did fantastic research in the 90s on the Hijras community in India, where they examined how the masculine and the feminine gender is used to refer to self, to refer to other Hijras. And they have shown, for instance, that in the process of becoming a Hijra, Hijras are born as boys but raised as girls who dance in ceremonies and weddings. And they are the third gender in India. They have shown that these people use gender in order to occupy this third gender identity, position. And then they use the feminine grammatical gender to refer to other hydras who are of younger age, or hydras who are of maybe inferior position, to establish relations of proximity or relations of solidarity. And they would use the masculine grammatical gender to refer to hydras of older age or of superior position, to establish relations of distance and respect, hierarchy. Okay, that's just a general description of the findings. I guess you need to look at their research for more details, but they have shown how gender also is inflected by sexuality, or how it inflects sexuality, because this is another important point that we should raise, that gender is intersectional. Okay, it intersects with social class, with ethnicity, with sexuality. It inflects other aspects of our identity. It is inflected by other aspects of our identity. So it's pretty heterogeneous. There are many women, many men, different types of women and men. It's very, very diverse. Now, how grammatical gender that imposes binaries. That's the problem. Once the information of sex is grammaticized in a language, it starts imposing binaries. But is this a trap? We can never escape from this trap, you know, we are stuck there and there is nothing that can be done? Or is there a way to navigate this complex landscape and construct gender as a more fluid category, as a more diverse category, and use grammatical gender in order to do that? I think we can. Also, Anna Christina Osterman, in a study that you conducted back in 2007, I believe it was, am I right? You've shown how this is done for some speakers living in Brazil. So I would recommend these two studies. If you want to start looking at the topic, maybe you can start with these two studies. And Kulik has also done research on the topic. Anna Livia has done research on the topic, focusing on French. And there are more people coming, you know, younger scholars, junior scholars working on sexuality and language as we speak. So it's a very, very rich field and very promising field. Yeah.
And it's quite interesting too that in my when we see that emerging too, we already have a hierarchy there. But again, the hierarchy is going to continue too, because then it's going to be more and more. But
yeah,
very interesting. We need more work on that, definitely. So as I can see here, there are no other questions, and we get to an hour and a half. So perhaps you'd like to make some final remarks, Angeliki?
Well, thank you for the invitation. It was great to be part of the Abrelina Ovivo online series. Take care, everyone. And yeah, good night. Kalinita.
An honor to have you here. Thank you so much for your time.
It was good to see you again, Anna. It was good to see you again.
It's wonderful to see you again. And thank you all for attending here. Thank you for being with us. People don't have how to contribute with clapping. So I'll do for all of us. Thank you again, Angeliki, and thank you, everyone. We're now like officially closing it then.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. I think